they feel like things are just kind of empty and they can't quite pinpoint exactly why. What is one place they can kind of start paying attention to or start exploring this week to better understand what it is that they're actually needing?
Sit with that uncomfortable or emotion. Right? You've identified it. It's not going anywhere. You're feeling it. So just sit with it. All right. Take a look at it, hold it, turn it over, examine it, and collect whatever data you can from it.
You recognize when they feel that way, who's there, like where are they when they feel that way, and does the feeling come on in the situation every time?
It's important to give yourself permission to feel like something's missing. And instead of trying to tell yourself to stop feeling that, it's what can I learn from this feeling? Let me dig into this a little bit and educate yourself about emotional needs and
It wasn't
Mhm.
until I started to develop the language to express how I was feeling where I started to be able to understand my emptiness and also receive what I was looking for.
welcome to No Alcohol Needed, the podcast. You are hanging out at the intersection of emotional wellness, personal growth, and living an alcohol-free life. Here we share everything we've learned and continue to learn about how to be happy, no alcohol needed. Hello and welcome to No Alcohol Needed, the podcast. Thank you guys for hanging out with us today. One of the most common things that we hear as coaches is my life is really great and I still feel kind of empty, like something's missing in life. And when we introduce the idea to people of having emotional needs and then of also getting them met, this is like a totally new concept for people. So, we are going to dig into what all of this means today, what are emotional needs, how it shows up in real life, and also just give you some things to think about when you're showing up in your life, when you're showing up in your relationships, and what you can carry forward with you to start creating that sense of like my life is full instead of like I've got it all and my life is empty. Let's just talk a little bit about what emotional needs actually are because I think we kind of skip over, like, none of us learn this in school. So, when you guys think of emotional needs, what are some of the things that come up first for you?
When I think about emotional needs, I guess defining them that way is an interesting way to define them. Like when I'm thinking about needs, I think of like basic human needs, versus everything else, versus like things we need to thrive. So when I think of emotional needs, I mean, the first thing that comes up for me is that so many of them lead back to safety and security.
Mhm. Absolutely. So emotional needs were totally new to me. I didn't learn about them until I was, in my 40s. But what really comes up for me, I think the ones that were really important for me were like feeling like I was important or like I actually mattered. That is an emotional need. It's actually a documented need that we have as humans, that we need to feel like we matter and that we're important to other people. Another one was I needed to feel like I was seen for who I am,
Mm,
not just for what I do and provide for people. And I think that's another one that probably a lot of people will identify with because a lot of times we feel like nobody sees who we really are. And the other one that was huge for me when I started learning about this was I have a very real need for deep and meaningful conversation, for
mm.
communication that goes below the surface, that talks about the stuff that, like drives us all. And those kind of conversations are a huge part of my list of emotional needs.
Yeah, the first thing that I thought of too was actually like security and stability. I feel like they were priorities in my life.
What does that mean? What is when you think of security and stability, what are those?
So I just basically like wrote down like safety, security, I guess like financial security is something that I think about
Mhm.
emotionally and not really. I think that's basically it. That's all
Yeah,
I really thought of. Yeah.
definitely. No, that makes sense. Financial security makes you feel safe.
Hmm.
When I
Go ahead, Steve.
think about emotional needs, the first place I go is relational. It is like between you and me, or Mike and myself, or it is like, what is our exchange? How am I, and I think you kind of said this in your way, like, how am I important in this relationship? There's a need to be like respected, to be wanted. You want me to be here, you want me in your space, and you want to share your space with me. And I think that's like it's a level of acceptance that, like, if I don't feel that emotionally, then I almost go to like, why am I here? Why am I bothering? Why am I, you know what I mean? I love a deep connected conversation, a deep connected relationship where we can dive into like really deep, crazy ideas, or uh, an exchange of emotions. Like, sometimes I just want to be freaking hugged, right? When that emotional need is like, I'm insecure in this moment and I would like some help to be secured. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those times, and we'll get into this about like who's responsible for what and when, probably too. There's a level of comfort that I think when we get our emotional needs met, we receive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so much of the, like, you guys talk, Christina and Mike, you guys talk about like that feeling of security. And Christina, you said like emotional security. I think that it's these different needs that we're talking about that kind of come together and meet that big overarching need of feeling stable and secure and safe in yourself and in relationships and in your life. And this stuff goes together with, obviously like our romantic relationships, that our life partners, but it also comes into play with our family and with our friends and all of this stuff. And how do we feel like we're solid and we're secure and we're stable in these relationships and in these spaces? So if we look at kind of, the maybe back before, when our behaviors were a little bit less healthy, um, what what are some of the behaviors that you used to try to cope with your needs not being met, either consciously or unconsciously? Sometimes I think we responded to unmet needs without even realizing that's what we were doing. But if you look back, what were some of the things you were doing?
For me, I mean, and this is going to circle back actually to your original question a little bit in terms of like emotional needs. The way that they were categorized in my mind, and obviously there's a lot of different ways that you can break them down depending like what discipline you're coming from. If you're going from like more of a sociological standpoint versus philosophical and that thing kind of thing. And sometimes like we might group them as basic or non-basic or like essential, versus like, I don't know, inessential needs. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like a real thing. But the fact that just because something is non-basic does not mean that it is inessential. Okay. Like, just because it's not on Maslow's hierarchy, I prefer to like think of needs in general like as like a Jenga tower, and everybody's Jenga tower is like a little bit different. And yes, those basic human needs, whereas if you pull one out, everything else is more likely to suffer, and you are less capable of meeting your other needs. So for me, I would say it showed up as a complete lack of awareness uh, of all needs, but no matter what discipline, which lens through which you wanted to look at it, I did not. There were my needs were based in a false belief system, or a belief system that did not serve me well. That was uh, in a lot of ways self-sabotaging. Last time I talked with you guys on here, the topic was actually people pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
So just for example, to pull that one out, if that is how you're craving for security and safety, comes out, that's not really a sustainable nor healthy way to meet it. And pre-recovery for me, and this is why recovery is just totally different than sobriety in my book. Like pre-recovery, my needs looked like somebody who needed to appear functional, who needed to appear successful or whatever. And they're very much based on superficial measurements, and they were just like I said, how important it is to understand our own little Jenga tower. I not ever used that metaphor before. I don't know why that's coming to me now. But
It makes
I
sense.
love it.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a great
For now,
visual because it's so true.
I'll hate hearing it later, but right now it's making sense to me. And I think it's so important to understand what our individual needs are, because again, the basic ones, yeah, those are homogenous. The others are as essential to our ability to live happily, I believe. And for me, it looked like a person who was living basically by someone else's needs. Again, just to appear a certain way, to appear as a certain type of partner, to satisfy a certain part of my ego, and that was where I was deriving security from in a really unhealthy way. So yeah, I would say those are some examples. I mean, I could pull. I was super dysfunctional, so I could make it rain.
I feel that.
Behaviors not to do, but
Yeah,
those are
I
a
hear you.
couple.
I still struggle like with that, honestly. I feel like I'm more worried about somebody else's needs than my own. The people pleasing, for sure. That's something I thought of too when I was looking over the notes for this topic, was, the people pleasing, for sure. For sure. And I feel like it leads to a lot of resentment, so there's some things.
Yeah, if the focus of your need is off, kind of like in anything really, then everything that comes after it is flawed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
A lot of us were told, like, or not, maybe not told, it was modeled for us by our parents, society, by school, by whoever, that one of our main needs as humans is to be approved of by others. And there's a difference between approved of and accepted by.
Yes.
That's the difference between fitting in and belonging, right? And so I think so many of us, we were like, I need approval. So I'm going to hustle that approval however I need to. And that turns into people pleasing. It turns into, whatever, overworking so that you can buy the big fancy house or whatever that looks like. I think that's something that a lot of us probably confused at some point growing up. And I think most of us weren't really taught that. It's just how we processed the information we were given as children and teenagers, that, you need people to approve of everything that you're doing if you want to be liked and therefore accepted.
I was very reactive. Reactivity was the word that I wrote down first. And so my reactivity was, there was this scenario in life where you should know what my needs are so you can meet them, because I don't know how to communicate them. And so if said scenario didn't work out well enough for you to know that was how I needed you to show up in my life, then I would create a bigger scenario to make it more important than it was before, so you could see that it was clearly important to me. And so that was like my really covert way. And I guess I can't even say covert. It was covert to me, but very,
Yeah, I was going to say that does not sound covert.
Passive aggressive works.
Yeah, like very obligatory. You know what I mean? Way of like saying, "Hey, I'm here. I want you to see me."
Yeah.
Like you said, dysfunction, Mike. That was one of my dysfunctional things, and I think that was a commonly used tactic on my part was to create bigger scenarios than
Mhm.
needed so I could be seen.
We learn
Yeah.
that one as children, don't we? When we feel like our parents aren't paying attention to us, we get louder, we get bigger, we get more dramatic. That's why kids like end up misbehaving because they just want somebody to pay attention to them. And that behavior carries through and it shows up again in adulthood and your adult relationships. It might look a little different, but it's basically the same concept, I think is what you're explaining there.
Are you trying to tell me that I was acting like an
Yes.
adult child?
Yes. I knew where
Maybe.
you're going.
Is that what
I
you're
tried
trying
to
to
say
say?
it nicer than that.
You're trying to tell me that I was acting like an adult child. That's fine. It was
Okay,
true. You're
so
not wrong. You're not wrong.
like I'll call out my own behaviors. We'll keep it even. So if I felt like I wasn't getting and the needs that I mentioned earlier, like seen for who I was, not just for what I do, meaningful conversation about things or feeling important, whatever those are. So if those needs weren't being met for me, I either got manipulative or I got passive aggressive, which I guess are kind of the same thing. But like I would try to guilt the other person into feeling bad that they weren't making me feel important so that they would start making me feel important. So, I mean, my unhealthy stuff isn't any worse than or isn't any better than yours, Steve. Like it's so hard to talk about that stuff because I'm like, oh my God, that was what I did. And
I
it
know.
doesn't feel good, but also I mean, it's all I knew. That's all I knew how to do. I didn't know any better. I remember like in the first early part of my marriage coming in and really trying to communicate like I really need this meaningful conversation in order to feel connected. And he just didn't have that to give, and his response wasn't any better than mine. I'm like, I'm not gonna lay blame here or anything, but eventually I gave up on that, and then I was just like, "Okay, fine, then I'm just gonna guilt you until you figure out how to give me what I need," which didn't work any better. Or, like, I would do the passive aggressive thing where if I felt like I wasn't noticed or I wasn't appreciated, I would, like, stomp around the kitchen and slam cupboards or just, like, pout until somebody was like, "Ooh, what's wrong with you? Are you okay?" And then I could be like, "Oh, now I have been noticed, and now I will tell you." Like like, it's not good, but when you don't have the words or the other person doesn't know how to hear the words or whatever that is, you resort to really unhealthy behaviors that you probably picked up in childhood, and you try to make those work instead, and I think that's where a lot of us found ourselves before we started learning how to do better.
Something interesting is jumping out at me, and that's that you guys in particular seem to be naming behaviors, that were unhealthy, dysfunctional, whatever, label you suboptimal in one way or another of meeting your needs.
Suboptimal.
However, there was a need you were going after, even if you were doing it, through means of like manipulation or passive aggressive, behavior. And what stands out for me is that I genuinely feel like into my early 30s, I had very little concept of even attenuating my life in that way, even around some of the basic needs.
Mhm.
So, like, I don't know, am I the outcast, or did you guys have a better
I
idea
don't
of what your
I
needs
don't
were?
think I could have told you at that
Okay.
time, "This is what I need." I just knew something was missing. I wasn't getting something that I feel like I wanted, and those are the things that I did. I can look back now and say, "Oh, what I needed was this." Like, I knew I needed conversation. That was one thing I knew about myself from young. But as far as, like, I need to feel seen, I don't think I could have told you those words until a few years ago. Does that answer that question? I'm just
Yes, yeah,
kind of
I'm
reflecting
writing down
back.
part of it, even
I
Okay.
because I'm sure we're gonna come back to it at some point. So
I was nowhere clearly attenuated to what my needs actually were. I couldn't even put words to it. That's why I
okay.
started out with reactivity. It
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
the reaction to an emotional response to either like not being seen, not feeling the feeling that I was expecting to feel, somebody not showing up in the way that I needed them to show up, but I didn't have words for any of that. You know, you win an award or you get a raise or something along those lines, something happens like that, and for you it's super important and you're expecting it, like your partner or whatever, you're expecting them to be just as excited about it as you, and then to like share that moment. And that is like an emotional need that comes with something cool that happens to you in your life. And when that doesn't happen, you feel the disappointment, and then there's the reactivity. And so it's like, this cool thing happens, it wasn't fucking shared. Now I'm in reactivity mode, and I'm going to create the scenario where now you see the thing that I was just trying to share with you. Is that better like way of explaining it?
I mean, specifically to what I was asking, yeah, that's perfect. For me, that illuminates it a lot, because, and again, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We're ahead of what you have planned to ask, maybe Julie, but I just imagine we're going to come back to some of this, in that, with you guys talking about reacting, or like Julie, you said, like, I could tell you what I felt, or but I couldn't necessarily communicate what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
Those
Exactly.
type of things. Okay, yeah,
They
that's
were
interesting
never
to me.
connected. They were
Mm-mm.
never connected, like a feeling and a need. They were never like one in of the same thing. It was a feeling, and then a react to like then a reaction. There was no connectivity at all to, this is what I'm actually trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go off script a little bit, because you just said kind of something I was gonna bring up a little bit later. It's great. It's perfect. So most people don't realize that your emotion that you're feeling is signaling a need. So that's what Steve's talking about, right? So you feel an emotion and then you react to it. And so if you are trying to be, you're excited about something and somebody else is like, cool, dude, and you're feeling disappointed and let down, that creates emotion that then just created reaction. If we can, this is where the emotional intelligence piece comes in. If we can look at the emotion, then we can say, okay, what need is this emotion pointing to? And that's where like the skill comes. And I'm not going to say any of us have this part figured out, like mastered. This is like, it's discovery, and it's just a path that we're all on. But can you guys give some examples of what that looks like, what you've learned about like how the emotion points to the need, so that we can maybe help our listeners start identifying what that looks like? What was that look for, Christina? That was like a look.
I'm just thinking, I'm like, I feel like this is all like blowing my mind a little bit. Like I'm actually, learning so much about, that feeling an emotion would be showing me what the need, trying to figure out what the need is that's making that emotion. So, I mean, that's something I have to ponder on for a second. So go ahead.
Sure.
For me, that it was like, as I did my applause while you're saying that, when, and not to get too like inside baseball or anything about this, but when we're scheduling the show, and we know what some of the topic ideas are going to be, and I see meeting needs, I'm like, fucking no thinking unnecessary here. Like, I know that's the one I want to do, because this is so down my alley. Like, I love this, because for me, such a huge part of my transformation and my growth was understanding that very, what is to me a very clear A to B relationship of emotions to need signaling. That, I mean, that was, I can't overstate what a huge, for me, that was the skeleton key to really unlocking many different areas of my life that were either painful or dysfunctional, painful for myself or painful for other, whatever, all of that. It was like something that, it's I wouldn't say like a cure all, but honestly, it's like an equation. And I tend to think like more in like a methodological way sometimes, but for me, that's kind of how I apply it, like an equation. So if before I had no idea how to deal with uncomfortable emotions, right? Uncomfortable emotions for me equal avoidance, and that manifested in many different ways. What changed in understanding that, exactly the way you laid it out, Julie, that is foundational to my own belief system now. And that gave me the ability to meet another one of these top tier personal needs, which is autonomy. It gave me ownership, gave me the ability to take responsibility for my emotions and take responsibility and have an influence in when I was feeling something that was uncomfortable. So, I don't like saying bad emotions or good emotions because they all serve a purpose. They are indicating a need. And so for me, that on so many levels, that elevated my ability to meet my needs and simultaneously remove myself from dysfunctional patterns that were sabotaging my life.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I think that's what most of us are like. For me, okay, so we'll like talk about an actual example. If I was feeling like disappointed in someone else's behavior, right? The first thing I would go to is I need to be more grateful. Well, that's not a need. That's a how can I shut this feeling down because I don't like feeling it and I feel like I shouldn't feel it, right? And I think we confuse ourselves. We're like, I need to just let it go. I need to, just get over it or whatever. And so I think if I ever tried to like figure out the need behind an emotion, it was some version of I need to shut this shit off so I don't feel it anymore. Once I realized that was not the goal, then there was a lot of like, what are needs to begin with? Okay, well, if I'm feeling let down and disappointed, what's the need here? Well, I needed something to be done. I needed to feel seen. I needed whatever. And then it becomes what action do I need to take from here? And I think, like one of the big ones for me is anger. If I get angry, the answer isn't I need to just shove it down and ignore it. The answer is there's a boundary here that's being crossed that I need to recognize and understand and communicate. Right. And so I think that if we can start looking at our emotions that way and say, okay, this thing is happening. What's, if a boundary is being crossed, well, then that's my need for autonomy or that's my need for respect or whatever that is. So I don't know. That's kind of where I go with that. If I like, I'd love to see if we can come up with some examples of here's this emotion in my life. Here's the need it's pointing to, because that is hard to pinpoint when you're
So-
just starting to understand this concept.
So I remember the first time, and it was close to like when you and I both started talking about like emotional needs and the fact that they were actually a thing. Well, Maslow's hierarchy, no one ever talks about emotional needs actually being a thing. But I mean, if you remove any sort of emotional connection that we do have, that's called fucking loneliness. And that is absolutely destructive. Loneliness, all in and of itself. If you remove all of that other stuff, we're going to feel pretty damn lonely because our emotional needs aren't being met by ourselves, or we're not asking for it outside of that.
Mhm.
That being said, when I started to realize that emotional needs were actually a thing, that means I need to start understanding what my emotions are and where they come from. Because if I only live in happy, sad, and mad, I'm going to have a really hard time trying to figure out what it is I actually need, because there's a little bit more to it. Also, that being said, a scenario, something that comes up for me is a lot of the times when I feel secure in myself, I don't have the emotional need, or the emotional need is being met of I love myself. I am secure in me. I am confident in my own abilities. And when shit starts falling apart and then I become insecure, my emotional need there is for someone to comfort me, because I'm not comforting myself right now. I'm lacking that ability. I'm not doing it well enough to comfort myself so I can get through whatever it is. And what I end up asking for is like, hey, like I would like either you in my space, or I would like some reassurance that the thing that I'm doing or whatever it is, and that helps build me back up. But like the emotional need there is I'm not meeting my own emotional need to create my own comfort and confidence. And even though, I've got a roof over my head, the temperature in the house is good, and, everything else is going fairly well, I can still experience discomfort and still kind of figure out, okay, like I'm insecure today. I might need a little bit of emotional support.
Hmm.
Um,
Definitely.
I can give an example for me, specifically, and this is going to be a very general emotion, but I'll give some specific examples. And that's often how it starts, right? The emotion might be somewhat vague or ethereal, and it's like, okay, kind of distilling it down into what does this actually mean? And it may mean several things. Okay, so anxiety. I My whole life since I was a little kid, lots of anxiety. Pretty good at masking it, but lots of anxiety, especially in my adult life around this time of year. And what became clear to me later, in my football career was that I was had this constant insecurity because whether you were playing out a contract that wasn't picked up yet, or you were somewhere where you knew you needed to move on to stay on whatever track I had, to keep elevating and stuff like that, there's tremendous pressure. And trying to keep tabs on that, which means like checking Football Scoop a million times a day and being involved in all the word of mouth stuff going on in the office, and if someone's taking an opportunity here, is that an opportunity for you? And it all just overwhelmed me so much and led to a lot of hypervigilance, which manifested in anxiety. It really wasn't until I my last year in football that I made that connection to some extent. Even it was really more so afterwards, after I had more education around it, that like, okay, you have several basic needs not being met here, including one of the crowning ones being like autonomy. You're feeling no autonomy or control over where your life is going. It feels dependent on a variable that feels dependent on a variable that feels dependent on another person, and that is scary. Okay, so
Yes.
the way I eventually met that need, and I could honestly give several examples into how this fit into that transition, but I just realizing that life, as much passion and aptitude and experience I had gained in football, that am and was really proud of, I was not going to be able to have the level of autonomy that I needed to have life balance, which I'm terrible at. Okay. That was not a career that was going to put me in a great position to meet those needs.
Hmm.
So it led me to, again, and this is kind of how I think about the formula. It's like, okay, emotion, go from there. What's the need? How do I discern the need from that? Okay, discern the need. How do I meet that need is an action. So then the action for me was I need to find a different way to, I need to find a different career. I need to find a different way to, and in many ways, football met a lot of needs that are important to me. But it just was, it was inherently limiting and going to be a barrier to me meeting other absolutely crucial needs for myself.
Hmm.
So there's a specific example of like how eventually I figured out, what was going on, got to have some ownership in it, and took some action to meet that need.
Yeah, I think that's such a good example. That's exactly
Mhm.
what that looks like. Here's this feeling. Where's the feeling coming from? What need is that showing me that I have, and how am I going to meet that need? Like that's a pretty epic, like life-changing example. And they don't all have to be epic and like life-altering, but I think that's exactly what we're talking about.
I
I
have
was going to
one
say,
that
Christina.
would be smaller, like a smaller one, but I was thinking like feelings of overwhelm, and what is that pointing to is like not having my emotional need of security or being met where I'm not. And but the problem, the resolution would be communication, so that's what I thought of when we were talking about that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess the other thing is to remember, like, one emotion does not always point to the same need every time, and I think Mike mentioned
Exactly.
that. So if I feel overwhelmed, and the first things that come up for me when I think of overwhelm is I have a need for support that's not being met, which means I need to communicate that. And it could be a different need the next time I feel overwhelmed,
Mhm.
whatever that looks like. So it's not like there's a we can't give you a handout that says if you're feeling this, then your need is this. Like
Hmm.
it's a get to know yourself and understand what the needs are, and then you'll start learning to identify them.
And through that process, doesn't your emotional vocabulary just grow so much?
It has to.
Because
Like there's no choice. Yeah.
How many
well, it's
Yeah.
times you
not, it
get it
becomes,
wrong before you get it right? Like,
yeah.
there's one thing that we talk about here, and it sounds like when you describe it, you have your shit together, and we don't. I have it more together than I did before because it was really, really messy trying to figure it out. Like, because there is no magic wheel where you go insecurity equals need equals action equals problem solve.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
like the
See the
emotion wheel is
emotional
great,
wheel.
but it doesn't have the
Exactly.
solution.
This helps with the
Right.
first part.
Yeah.
Right. It
Right.
does.
And so it's like it's kind of a wheel of fortune thing where one always doesn't match the other one. It's the scenario and the feeling and where you're at in the whole thing that needs all this like level of discernment, and you kind of have to be okay with it being messy. And literally, I'm going to actually plug our meeting just for this because we host a meeting every Monday night at 6:30 Mountain Time, which is 8:30 Eastern PM. Every Monday night we're on Zoom. And if you want to find that link, it's on our website at noalcoholneeded.net. It's right there, super easy to find. You can sign up for the newsletter, and you'll actually get the topic with the link every week right in your inbox, which is pretty amazing. Julie writes it, and she's a phenomenal writer, so you always get value. Anyways, I will move on from that. An amazing way to practice this is to go to a meeting. It doesn't have to be ours, but go to a meeting and have and share in the discussion and become a part of it. And then when you're in a space where all of these people are trying to figure their own shit out anyway, we make mistakes and then we bounce stuff off of each other, and eventually we find our own solution by being messy in a spot where we're already choosing to be messy with each other.
Yep.
Hmm.
And when you get to do that, you can then take those lessons where you have that safe space that's created for that and take it outside of that and bring it into your relationships and bring it into your work environment where you've practiced it a little bit and it doesn't get as messy outside of that meeting environment because you've tried it and tested it and you've had some time to digest it.
Hmm. And
We're
that's an important point there too, is if you're sitting there struggling with an emotion, either naming it or then understanding what need it's pointing to, one of the most valuable things is go either to a meeting, talk to a counselor, talk to your coach,
Mhm.
whatever that is, and get some perspective. Because they may have seen this in their own lives. They may have talked to somebody else with this. They may have learned about this. They may have a new perspective to offer you to help you point out what, like to help you grab onto, oh, that's the need. Because I know forever I would be feeling, I would journal for pages. Like, what is it I'm needing here? And like, I know the feeling, I know what's going on. I don't know what the need is. And sometimes it helps so much to just tell somebody, like, this is where I'm at. I can't figure out what I need here. And the little bit of outside perspective when they're not sitting right in it like you are can change everything and open up some doors so you can figure out what actions you're needing to take in that moment. So, whether it's at a meeting, whether it's with a trusted friend who understands these concepts, whether it's with, a professional that you're working with, outside perspective helps so much in uncovering what it is that you're needing.
that comes back to why connection is such a fundamental need for me. And like you were saying early on, Julie, the need for conversation. That's just one example of why that is also why I share that need.
Mhm.
And like you said, the feeling can indicate many different things, but like that's one of the actions that is indicated by some of those emotions for me.
For sure. Okay, so let's talk about like what happens when okay, I'm gonna like leave the script again really quick. We're talking a lot about getting our needs met, and I think we need to talk a little bit about whose responsibility is it to meet your needs, because sometimes we're talking about communicating our needs to other people, but where does that responsibility end? Because I think we need to be careful with this. So many of us, and I'm totally guilty of this. In like when I first started learning about these, I'd be like, I need connection. You need to meet my need for connection. And that's where I went to immediately. So then I'm looking around, pointing at everybody, and I'm like, you're not meeting this need for me. You're not meeting this need for me. And I wasn't taking responsibility for that. So I think maybe that needs to come into this conversation a little bit. What does that look like? Where does the line get drawn between responsibility?
Steve's pointing at himself, and
Right. But then, like, yes,
he
it's
made
your
me think of this.
responsibility, but can you not ask your partner to say, "Hey, like, if I need a hug, I'm feeling insecure. Can I ask my partner for that hug? What does this look like?" Right? So how does that look? Let's just talk about how it shows up. I don't think there's a right
I
answer.
I am responsible for my needs first and foremost. I'm also responsible for communicating them,
Mhm.
and you are not responsible for meeting them.
Mhm.
And I think
Right.
this is where this is the part where we get lost. Well, it's my partner, it's my need. I can't meet them right now, so they should be doing it.
Right.
That's entirely possible that they're not capable or they don't have the capacity or they don't even know how to communicate it. My responsibility to communicate it, my responsibility to find a willing participant, my responsibility to make sure that I am taken care of. If I can't take responsibility for all of those things, then I really can't have a healthy conversation about what it is that I need met from outside of me. It's okay to have needs that need to be met outside of me. It's not okay for me to hand that expectation over to you. I would love for it to come from you because when I feel this way, it helps me a lot. Also, I can't expect that all the time. It is
Mhm.
just not healthy. It isn't the way, I mean, I'm not perfect at it, but if I inherently take that responsibility on, then I also inherently take on the responsibility of understanding where it's all coming from, uh, trying to like figure all of that stuff. I take care of all of my back end stuff. And by the time I show up, hopefully I'm not too messy, even though when I'm asking for my emotional needs to get met, I'm generally probably in a little bit of a messy spot. Unless I just want like that awesome connection between myself and my partner or a friend or whatever that may be, and that just happens and occurs naturally. But it is my responsibility. It starts with me and it ends with me, and it has to be that way. Otherwise I will be a victim to you not doing it.
Mhm.
Mm.
Right. What comes up for you there, Christina?
I I really don't know. Honestly, I'm just trying to think like I do feel like it is, it like Steve said, it begins and ends with me. But I'm like thinking how if somebody I mean, I guess it depends on what the need is that's not being met. And if it requires somebody else to meet that need in order for it to be met, how what does that say about your relationship with that person? I don't does that make sense? Like, I mean, should they I mean, you can't expect them to know how to meet the
Mhm.
need, but,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm kinda, like, stuck on that.
I think
So
So
there's
I
a shared go ahead. I'll stop.
I'm just gonna
yeah,
say when I think about that, so there's a lot of like, okay, I recognize that I have this need. My next job, if this need is something that I do need to have met by another person, because often that does happen and that's okay. then it's communicate the need to the person. I think it's so helpful to be able to communicate, here's what this looks like for me. Like, I need meaningful connection. Here's what that looks like in my life. Like, give them the answers, right? And then give them the opportunity to meet that. And if they still either can't or won't, then the responsibility comes back to you to decide then what you're going to do with that information, because that's
Mhm.
data, right? If I
Mhm.
say to this person, this friend, hey, this is what I need from this friendship. I really need to spend some time in person with you once in a while because that's how I feel connected. And that friend is like, I just don't have time. That's not something I can do. I'll talk to you again in 6 months. I have to decide what I'm going to do. Is that a friendship I'm going to keep pouring my effort into? Or do I need to go like develop some other friendships or whatever? And when we get into romantic relationships, that gets messy and hard and painful if we're being like really real. But I think that's where the responsibility is it's my responsibility to communicate it and to share with you, this is what that looks like for me. And then it's your responsibility to respond in whatever way you're going to. And then it's my responsibility to decide what I'm going to do with that response.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like when we started off and you were asking for an example, and you spoke like your own experiences, and Steve talked about like how he would act, and then act out more when he had a need. And I found this interesting. This is why I clarified early on, because I didn't find that personally like that relatable for me, because we are just different the way we're wired. And for me, I thought of all needs, and I wasn't even thinking about that on this level, but in retrospect, I was thinking about them all being met endogenously. Like I had to be the one that had to meet them, or they were going to be, or there was avoidance. It was I meet it or it's avoided. Where you're talking about looking for them exogenously outside yourself, that's where, like, if I bring it back to that like formula or skeleton key type method, that the way I think about it, that's the action phase. So it's like the emotion, discerning from the emotion the need, and then how you act on it depends on the need. That need, exactly like you just explained, Julie, may be coming from someone else, like your partner, or someone you're in business with. Like
Yes.
I need you to pull more of the weight. I'm feeling, really overwhelmed, whatever. But there's nothing wrong with it's just going to happen. You absolutely need things from other people that are in interpersonal relationships. But yes, the responsibility of figuring that out, being able to communicate it, and then make a decision whether or not that person can meet it is comes back to me.
Hmm.
That's exactly why I was pointing at myself the whole time.
Yeah, and I
Like,
know.
and like, it is in the end. What happens is when we start sharing our needs and showing up for each other, is that's where we start to develop the connection and the trust. Because
Mhm.
every time I share a need, I risk rejection. And
Yeah.
Hmm.
so if I take care of all of my own needs, like you were saying, Mike, I don't risk rejection anymore, but I also sacrifice connection.
Yeah,
100%.
sacrifice a lot. Yeah.
Lose one to gain the other. And that
Mhm.
level of independence is generally pretty unhealthy. And
Very.
so if I can't share my needs with you, and if we can't willingly participate in meeting each other's needs, then we don't really have much of a friendship. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure there are people out there that are going to be listening to this and think, man, I have this friendship that feels like it's one way all the time. I'm give, 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 give. And they take, 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 take. And the only way that these people ever show up in my life is if I give 10 and then I get one. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I'll message 10 times, I'll get one message back. Or I'm always the one that engages in the conversation first. I'm always the one that says hello. And then eventually that's emotionally draining. That is me trying to have my need met by having conversation with you because I like who you are. but you aren't reciprocating that. And so the needs shared, needs met by each other, needs communicated to each other, creates the actual connection that we're looking for. That's loneliness gone. That is sharing life with each other. That is partnering with people on your own journey.
Mm-hmm.
And
That is
that's what I think is the
huge.
strongest connective tissue. Like I can feel connection through other means and relationships, but what you're talking about in terms of like co-opting and the meeting of the need and the vulnerability of being comfortable enough to share it and articulate it to them and have it received and vice versa, all of that, that's like the strongest connective tissue to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that, like, the first thing that comes up to me when I'm thinking about this is like attachment theory, right? You're like the people who are typically avoidant, dismissive, avoidant, whatever. They essentially do everything in their power to have no needs, to not have to depend on another person, to be completely independent. And that sets that takes away that opportunity for connection because they're not sharing that vulnerability. They're not saying, I need this from you. And then the more anxious attachment style is going to be like, I need. And if you don't meet it, then, oh, the world is ending. I mean, that was me. I'm not like dissing anybody else. That's just how I was. But it was like, I couldn't meet any of my own needs. I needed somebody to meet all of them. And so like when I don't know, that's the first thing that comes up there because there are so many people that they are, based on all of whatever's happened throughout their entire lives, their most deeply held value is to be independent and to
Mm-hmm.
need no one. And when you get to that point, it is so lonely. And there are people like reaching for connection with you that you can't even engage with them like that until you start letting those walls down and let yourself become interdependent.
There's
And
so
that's
much
hard and
risk.
scary and vulnerable.
There's so much risk in that, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, the more we go today is we're more and more risk averse and less resilient, especially emotionally right now, where I think it's super important to reconnect with each other and sit in the same room with people that we care about and let them know we care about them because
Yes.
we're all stuck in kind of the rat race and we all have these emotional needs that kind of go unmet because they don't they don't meet the roof over your head, they don't meet the sustenance and food. That's like the two things that you need. Financial security, emotional needs fall on the back burner because everything else seems to come first. And
Mhm.
I think we forget, and it happens last because when it goes so long, we start breaking down and we start losing resilience and we start getting snippy and we start turning into this person that we didn't really want to be and apologizing for it later on.
Right. 100%. Okay, so I'm
Um,
gonna throw out like a oh, go ahead, Mike.
I
You
was
can
just
go.
gonna come back to something that you said about it was very early on about feeling seen and feeling understood. Or maybe I'm interjecting the understood part because that's really how
I'll agree.
come.
I don't think I said that, but I'll agree with it.
Okay, but being seen is also part of it to me. That's just how
Mhm.
I usually communicate it. Is like being understood.
It's the
Very, very,
emotional
very.
it's the emotional need of belonging.
Mhm.
Yeah, that I mean that is part of it. Yeah, I mean the way it shows up though specifically, I'm guessing between the two of you at some point, like I've probably said like something to the effect, and this is, I know it's gonna come across sounding super therapized or whatever, but like or new agey or something, but like I have a need for you to know how much I appreciate this. I have a need. I'm sure. I feel like I might have said this over things to both of you at one point or another, because you both have met needs from me and just or just done things that are really meaningful to me or that I really appreciate and think are really well done. And again, that desire or need to be understood and seen, that's a need of mine. So I act on it. I'm
Mhm.
feeling that way and I consider that a need. So I'm going to act. I'm going to send a message to Steve or
Mhm.
Julie and say, like, I just have a need for you to know, like, this is really important to me. That mattered a lot.
Mhm.
Yep.
Can I add something real quick too? I was just
Please
going to
do.
add something.
Yeah.
I'm going to plug the meeting too, the Monday night meeting, because it's like I find that going there, it is a sense of belonging. It's like it's my people, that I found, whatever 610 days ago, and it's like I know sometimes, my day will get away from me and I am just like feeling all these rough emotions, so many I just can't even. And I know that showing up there is going to make a difference because it's with, people that they're meeting that need that I do need,
Mhm.
to belong and to be seen. And it's a great place to be.
It's comforting.
That need for belonging is real. It's
Mhm.
real, and sometimes it's hard, and you're in the life that you're currently in your space that you're currently in. It's hard to find belonging. It's hard to find a place where you feel safe enough to be seen.
Mhm.
And so we do our best to provide that. And I know there's other great places that you can do that
Mhm.
too. But, for those of you who are out there looking for, and it doesn't even have to be a recovery like sobriety meeting. This can be one thing that several people have mentioned is like a grief support meeting is the
Mhm.
place that they first experienced feeling seen. So there are places everywhere, but find you a place where you feel safe enough to be seen and belong. And that's like one of the core needs that we all have that'll start giving you the confidence to start looking at some of the other needs too. So I'm going to close it off with this one last question. Just give me kind of a quick first thing that comes to mind when I ask you. So if there's somebody listening right now and they feel like things are just kind of empty and they can't quite pinpoint exactly why, what is one place they can kind of start paying attention to or start exploring this week to better understand what it is that they're actually needing?
I do have a quick response for you on this that I took some notes.
Great.
Um, I was saying that they should try to maybe recognize when they feel that way, who's there, like where are they when they feel that way, and does the feeling come on in the situation every time, and just, I mean, if need be, communicate that feeling with the person who's there, or they could journal about it if it's just something on their own. So that was my suggestion.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Thanks. That's very accurate. What about you, Mike?
I'm glad you mentioned journaling because that was something I kind of wanted to like plug in there. We were talking about the value of bouncing it off other people and stuff. Like, even at the very least, you have a pen and paper available to you at any time, even if you're not ready for a level of vulnerability around that, whatever the issue is. Even that has value in terms of messiness and kind of organizing our thoughts and understanding them a little bit better. If someone out there is feeling that, my my inclination is just to really impress upon them that, like, that can be caused by so many things. Um, and I think emptiness, particularly, what that communicates to me is like a lack of fulfillment, and fulfillment can come in so many different ways. So I mean, I feel like I've pretty much I've answered this in some ways, so I don't want to belabor the point. But really, I think it's sit with that uncomfortable or emotion. Right? You've identified it. It's not going anywhere. You're feeling it. So just sit with it. All right. Take a look at it, hold it, turn it over, examine it, and collect whatever data you can from it. Um, because that's going to lead you to that next phase of being able to specifically discern it and then meet it. Um, I think purpose is just unequivocally something we all need. And culturally, I think we are taught to look for it in only a few places when it exists many, many, many
Mhm.
places. So give yourself that opportunity.
Definitely. I love it. Yeah, I think there it is so multifaceted. There's so many parts to it. That feeling of emptiness for me, the first thing I did was try to shove it down and tell myself I shouldn't feel this way. I should just be more grateful. So it's important to give yourself permission to feel like something's missing. And instead of trying to tell yourself to stop feeling that, it's what can I learn from this feeling? Let me dig into this a little bit and educate yourself about emotional needs and what those are and how they show up, because once you understand them and you can like see the list of what emotional needs are, you'll start to better see what parts of those are missing in your own life.
Oh, can I say one thing really quick before I'm sure Steve's going to say something brilliant? Since we flooded the meeting, I'm going to plug. I have like worksheets that have
Awesome.
myriad different kinds of exercises to help people answer these questions. So they are totally available if anybody listening is in that position and wants to go through an exercise like that. So
Awesome. And so I'll just follow that up with saying you can go to noalcoholneeded.net and click on Meet the Voices, and you can find Mike's information, his links. You can get in touch with him that way. You can also find Christina there and learn about both of them. So, yeah, if you want to get in touch with Mike, I think that's awesome. And that's how you do that.
So I'm going to circle back to when I was empty and when I felt emptiness. If I had developed the language, then my emptiness would have gone away a lot sooner. It wasn't
mhm.
until I started to develop the language to express how I was feeling where I started to be able to understand my emptiness and also receive what I was looking for. And so what I'm going to say is the book that helped me out the most, Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown. Julie's smiling because she knows exactly what I'm saying.
Great book.
A phenomenal way to start giving yourself the language. And I will bet money that if you read that book, your level of empty feeling will start to go away because you will start to develop the knowledge you need to start communicating what you're looking for to start filling your heart. My heart is more full today because I can express to you, Mike, and you, Christina, and you, Julie, in a way that's authentic to me, and you can meet me where I'm at. And I have to be able to do that with me first. It all starts with us. So pick up that book. It has changed my life. So thank you guys. Thank you all. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Christina, for joining us on this episode and sharing this whole episode about emotional needs and communicating and identifying them. It's so important to fulfilling relationships and full relationships and ones where you can find out who's like a willing participant in your life. We've already said so many wonderful things. I just want to say thank you again. And to the rest of our listeners, like, subscribe, follow. I know you're out there. I know you're going on YouTube or just going on Apple Podcast and typing in No Alcohol Needed Podcast. You could just hit subscribe and then you'll know exactly when the next episode comes out. Well, it like notifications, as much as I hate them, I want you to have that notification. That would be cool. Anyways, thank you for being here with us. I appreciate you guys so much.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
guys.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.